Good morning, everyone. Hi, parents. Welcome. And today we are having a very important conversation today about parental alienation. And if you are a victim of parental alienation, especially as parents, this is a very important conversation to watch. We have the honor to have with us today, again, Dr. Stanley Clawar. Thank you so much, Dr. Clawar, for being back with us. Dr. Clawar is one of the pioneer experts in this field, and he first published a book, Children Held Hostage, which are now have been on the second edition, and the third edition is going to be coming out, and we're going to be talking about that a little bit as well. But the majority of the conversation today is going to be about prevention and solution for parental alienation, including all form of treatment, reunification, things like that. So it's a very important conversation, like I mentioned. My name is Petra Deeter, and I am from VictimToHero Institute. We are live streaming to across syndicating through a lot of our partners today. So thank you so much to our partners for your support. And parents, if you are calling in from anywhere, let us know where you're calling in from. Let us know, how many children do you have and the age of your children, because we have noticed that the age of the children seem to have a factor in the level of severity and things like that. So really quite interested to hear from you, and also where, like I mentioned, where you're calling in from. Let us know you can hear us clearly, because I do sometimes have problem with the technical side of things. So anyway, good morning. And anyway, Dr. Claywar, thank you so much for being here. Why
Thank
don't
you.
we talk a little bit about the book before we talk about the content of other things? So, you have two books so far that were published by the American Bar Association, which obviously have a lot of influence in the decision maker in this field. And one of the book was, Children Held Hostage, that have got two editions so far. And then the second book that just came out last year is Parent-Child Reunification. Um, could you so you I know that you're working on the third edition of Children Held Hostage now. What is going to be the addition, the new things that going into the Children Held Hostage? What can we be looking out for?
Well, thank you for having me. I appreciate the opportunity to speak to you again and your audience. The Children Held Hostage, last edition was 2013. So this year we're working on basically revising all the chapters, updating them, adding probably about a half a dozen new chapters. Those chapters will include special sections on severe cases of alienation, because alienation can go from very minor to extremely severe, which we'll probably talk about later. There are new chapters on interventions, what can be done at early stages or at more advanced stages. So those kinds of things will be in the new edition. And the reunification book, of course, is about rebuilding the bonds that have been damaged in different ways.
Oh, very good. So these are really important topics, and a lot of it, hopefully, we could cover some of it today.
Yeah.
Um, that's excellent. And then, how is that different from the parent-child reunification book? Is that some of the content of the parent-child reunification book is going into the third edition of Children Held Hostage?
The reunification book is almost exclusively on many, many different aspects of reunification. How do you rebuild the bonds? Who can do it? What are some of the excuses that people use to prevent reunification? Because alienation people tend to be quite persistent and have very good stamina. So the book
Oh,
talks
that's
about,
shocking. Really?
as you say, satirically. So the book focuses on also what we can talk about today a little later on. What are some of the common approaches that people use to interfere with reunification? Because just because reunification is ordered by the courts or by a guardian or agreed upon doesn't mean that alienating parents stop the alienation. Some do, but many don't. So the book tries to address some of those practical issues. And where do the judges come in? Where do professionals come in? There are chapters on what kind of professionals can really best serve the interest of rebonding or rebuilding the social bonds, because alienation, as you know, is about the destruction and the damage to the social and emotional and physical bonds between a parent and a child.
Very good. Thank you so much. Okay, and hi everyone in the chat room. I start seeing questions and things, so thank you so much. Miles, hi, thank you for letting us know that you could hear us. Jill is talking about how she has two daughters, 12 and 13, that has been alienated against her, and she really needed help. Jill said that she's having trouble hearing Dr. Clawar. Does anyone else have trouble hearing Dr. Clawar? Please let us know. And maybe, do you think you could see if you could turn up your volume a little bit? And then Jill is from Massachusetts. Bobby, hi, thank you so much for calling in. Okay, so and then there's more question about pressing judges. And then you guys, if you could please help us sharing this. I know some of you may not be comfortable sharing it on your own personal page, but I'm sure that you are in different Facebook groups or things like that, so anywhere that you could help us share this to spread the words, because we wanted to help as many people as possible. Okay, so let's talk about prevention. Now, as a parent, if you're going through a divorce, hopefully early enough that you kind of know that your ex will likely be hostile, what can you do to prevent your children from becoming alienated?
Well, there are a number of things to do. First of all, you have to try to maintain or possibly increase the frequency of contact. Alienating parents try to limit, interfere with, reduce, or eliminate the physical contact. If you don't have physical contact, you're not going to have social and emotional contact. So I think you need to listen with your third ear to initially, are there any things coming up that are distortions? For example, children start asking questions that may seem like they came from somewhere else. For example, did we lose our home because of you? Mom said we're not living in our home now because you didn't pay support. Why didn't you pay regular support? Did you really cheat on mom? Dad did everything when I was young. And by the way, these are classified as distortions because they're either inaccurate or they're the opposite of the case. In the case where dad did everything when I was young, it was a mother who did everything from, of course, giving birth to breastfeeding to taking care of the child until they were 5 years old when the divorce came about. So keep your ears open for distortions. And by the way, we'll talk a little later about what do you do about that. And many parents say, I don't want to get into a problem with the child. I don't want them to be upset. So I won't say anything about it. That's probably the wrong approach. If there's a significant lie, distortion, or modification of reality, you need to deal with it. And we'll talk about some ways to do it. And by the way, the alienation may not come always from the other parent. I have a case recently where a child went into school and walked up to the teacher and unannounced said, you need to know that my mom hit me. When the investigation was done on such a claim, because that alone is enough to trigger a Children and Youth Services investigation, which will then trigger a loss of time between the parent and child, which is one of the goals of an alienating parent. The case evolved to the point where it was discovered when the child was asked quite simply, basically, how did you say that? Or why did you say that? The child said, well, my aunt told me when I go to school that I should tell the teacher that mom hit me. So it was a fairly simple discovery, but that's what we call a surrogate. So surrogates can either do the alienation, especially if the other parent is under court surveillance, so to speak, and they may be a primary source of inculcating, false beliefs or false statements. Prevention also includes continuing to do many activities with the children, social activities. We'll talk later about how many different activities you can do. The social bonds are built by doing things together. So the more things that you do together with the child, the stronger the social bonds become. Also for prevention, connecting them to grandparents, friends, neighbors, others, social contacts. It's called the layering of bonds because children get layered in their connections. Children often lose contact with grandparents of the target parent. because one of the goals is really to cut off all family contact on the side of the parent who's called the target parent. Don't be afraid, as far as prevention, to counter assertions. Child says, "You're a liar, you're lazy, you don't really love me." These are common things you hear from children who are in the alienation process, because it is a process. It takes time. It usually starts out slowly and escalates continuously. It's a self-escalating phenomena. If it's not interrupted, interfered with, or changed, it often will escalate to a higher level. Are you a liar? Well, don't be afraid to challenge it. Are you really lazy? Well, that's interesting, because you work all week partially to pay support or to help with whatever you're doing. You're not lazy. Providing counter information is helpful in prevention, but facts don't necessarily change alienation. So if you're going to provide facts as to why you're not a liar, that's good. But you also need to connect emotionally. What is the emotional bond between you and the child? That can be included in the discussion. Emotional bonds of love, of affection, of caring, of protection, whether you in fact are doing these and have done these. It's very important not to counter alienation with counter alienation. That's really not good. That's what we call cross alienation. It's the normal thing to do, to say, well, your mother said this, your father said this. Let me tell you something about them. Okay? I'm not the one who cheated. They did. So that kind of thing is usually, by most clinicians, not recommended to do. So building bonds, reinforcing bonds, connecting them to other people who are important in your life, in their life, is really important. And keep your eyes open for any attempt to reduce the connection. Late drop-offs, early pickups, child is sick all the time, can't really come today, limiting information, finding out that your name is not on the medical form, your name has been taken off the school form. These are kind of early warning signs. Some of them could be legitimate errors or mistakes, so we're not leaping to the ultimate conclusion until we find out. And usually these things run in clusters. They run in patterns. The child saying things don't sound like a child. A child recently talked about that the father didn't really want to, quote, reunite. This is a 6-year-old. Not too many 6-year-olds use the term reunite. That, you didn't really want to reunite in the family. Mom wants to get the family back together again. Mom says she still loves you. So why won't you reunite the family? Translation, you broke the family. Translation, you're trying to keep the family apart. Translation, Mom is a good person. Translation, you're not a good parent. So these are all symbolic messages, through this question from the child. And obviously in this case, it was a fairly early stage of an alienation process. Alienation could be intentional or unintentional. So a mother saying, well, I tried to keep the family together, dad wouldn't do it. Is she intentionally trying to drive the child apart? Maybe not. However, the results can be the same whether alienation is intentional or unintentional. So those are some preventative things that can be done.
Thank you so much. That's amazing. I mean, that's so much information, and I hope the parents catch all that. He was talking about increasing contact, increasing interaction, counter assertion, things like that. So that's a lot of information. Really, honestly, I don't think I have seen a lot of this out there before. We watching a lot of the information that out there on YouTube and everywhere else, and there's always a lack of information when it comes to what parents can do. So thank you so much. Could we dig a little bit more into so for example, you said talking to your children, and you mentioned about counter assertion. Don't counter alienate, but don't feel uncomfortable about defending yourself. Could you give a little bit more example into what else can we talk to our children about? how do we talk to our children? Because a lot of the time, obviously I'm thinking about more severe case, the children kind of shut down. So it seems like the more we say, the worse it becomes.
Well, it can, because we tend to try to counter alienation with facts. The fact would be, let me show you the checks. This is proof that I did this. So that will have a limited effect. What I've been doing in more recent years is helping the parents with emotional dialogue. So, for example, a mother recently was coached to say to her daughter, who now says she really doesn't want to see her, doesn't want to be with her. And she said something like the following: before you were born, I loved you. When I gave birth to you, I loved you. And when you were a child, a younger child, I loved you. By the way, honey, I love you now. I will always love you. I'm not going anywhere. I'm in your life. I'm your mother. That's called a role assertion. So clinicians need to learn to teach a reaffirmation of the role, because what's being damaged here is the role. The alienating parent wants the other parent to be seen as not the mother, as not caring, as not loving. So discussions that revolve around love bonds, caring bonds, connection bonds have a more of an impact than sometimes just the factual information. Repeating this, which I often recommend, repeating things that have to do with the connection and with the past, where the connection was often good, because parents who get alienated often have a good history. That's why they're perplexed. I can't understand why my child would say, I hate you. We'll get to that a little bit later. Does the child really hate them? Well, in the early stages of alienation, the answer is no. They don't really hate them. They're parroting, they're mimicking, they're under coercion, they're under role modeling, they're under pressure. They don't really hate, in this case, really hate the mother, although the child did say it. I hate you. So in later stages of alienation, it may sound authentic because they've been through enough pressure, enough repetitions, and they may come to believe their own assertion at that point. But that's down the road. So connecting factual information with historical information of love bonds, taking out photographs, taking out videos, showing the party where the child ran up, in this case to the mother, and hugged her, and on the video said, "Mommy, I love you. This is the best party I ever had." That's worth 1,000 facts. Usually parents have materials, whether they're video materials or they're audio materials, or they're a grandparent who was present when certain important things happened, and they share their recollections and their informations. This also gets into another feature. I don't know, we'll have time today to talk about memory distortion. One of the most interesting aspects of this phenomenon for me is how memory can be modified, distorted, or created. Alienating parents will often say, that never happened. Or, by the way, it was the opposite that happened. Or, by the way, that event didn't take place there. It took place somewhere else. So memory distortion, and by the way, the longer the alienation, the more distorted the memory is. And in the reunification book, I've written about 30 different types of memory. If your viewers are interested in that, that's in chapter 4 of the reunification book, where we talk about emotional memory, which is different than factual memory, which is different than facial memory, which is different than created memory. And one of the most fascinating things that alienated parents talk about is memory that's created. This never happened. We never went there. I never said this. How can the child say this? How can the child believe this? I never hit my child. They're saying now on each visit that I hit them. I'm not a hollerer. I'm a peaceful person. And now the reports are I holler and scream all the time. And by the way, in that case, interviewing people who know that parent confirm that they never holler. If anything, they talk too softly. And under duress, they tend to get focused and careful and thoughtful. So how can a child then report to CYS, to therapists, to judges, to others? I don't like going to my dad's, mom's, because he, she hollers all the time. So this is under the category of memory distortion or memory modification. When children have short-term memory and they have long-term memory, and they're different. And by the way, both of them can be modified. Under good therapeutic intervention, correct memory is reinstated. That you did have a good time at that party, as some children have said to me, well, you think I did. I say, excuse me? You did or didn't have a good time at the party? Well, I know what you're going to say. You see all those faces, they're smiling, and my dad's smiling too, but that's just because he's an actor. He's a faker. So even though it looks like I'm happy and he's happy, that's not true. So we get all these, they're called distortions of reality. Okay, this kid's pretty far along because they'll defend their positions. That's one sign of a little bit more severe cases of alienation, where they not only assert something that either didn't happen, happened in a different way, but then if it's challenged, they defend that, even though there's external information that it didn't happen in the way that they said that it happened.
Thank you so much. And actually, for parents that haven't seen it, we interviewed Dr. Elizabeth Loftus, who is an expert in memories, distortion and false memories. So if you haven't seen that interview, it's actually a very good one and very insightful to watch. So if you go into our website at VictimToHero.com, or you go to our Facebook page, Victim to Hero on Facebook, and go to our videos tab, you can find the interview with Dr. Elizabeth Loftus that's talk about this. And in the chat room, I saw Tracy. She's actually was the child. She's now an adult child of parental alienation who have experienced it herself. She's in our team at the Hero Circle. Thank you, Tracy, for being here. But she brought up something really important. Is it's interesting, like you mentioned, it's memory distortion and false memory is entirely possible, but for some reason, it seemed like the culture as well as the professionals don't recognize this, and they seem like, oh, if the child says something, then it should be the absolute truth. People seem to think that children are innocent and anything the children say should be taken at the face value. And I think Laura in the chat room also brought this up as well. Do you have any advice for parents how to counter or address this, especially when the professionals or teachers or therapists, lawyer, judges that seem to get misdirected about this?
Yeah, this goes way back in many years when I gave a talk to a professional society, and I first started talking about children having the capability to misrepresent abuse. It was believed and is to date that if a child says there is abuse, that it is always true. It is always the case. And that was almost, how can I say, believed totally. I think it's opening up a bit now because we're understanding that children can distort, they can misrepresent. And I remember receiving a question at that meeting saying, are you suggesting that children lie about being hit? Are you suggesting they lie about sexual abuse? And my answer was, no, I'm not saying that they're intentionally, but they can do it intentionally too, intentionally doing this, but children can misrepresent for all different reasons. And there was a lot of debate and argument over it. I said, well, let me put it this way. Is it possible that a child goes into the kitchen and steals a cookie before dinner? They're really not supposed to eat that cookie. Mother, father comes in and says, did you have a cookie? And the child says, nope, I didn't have a cookie. And mother, father says, really? You want to stick to that story? No, I didn't. Father, mother says, well, come here. I just want you to look in the mirror. See that chocolate around your lips? That's from the Malamar that you just ate. Now, I'm very upset, one, because you ate the cookie before dinner, but two, because you're lying. So the concept is, can children lie? Yes, under different conditions, they can lie. They can lie to protect themselves. They can lie to distort it. They can lie to cover for a sibling. They can misrepresent for many reasons. So why can't we kind of extend that phenomenon and say, are there other circumstances under which they can be induced to misrepresent reality? Okay. And of course, working in this field, we see it regularly. The problem is to be able to sort out, legitimate problems from those that are induced, by alienation. That is not always easy to do. And it creates a dilemma, for professionals. And by the way, can children have, legitimate problems with a parent who's a target parent? Yes, they can. Sometimes parents have the wrong communication style with their child, which, by the way, might enhance the alienation, or it might actually induce further conflict. So these are things that professionals have to sort out. Is it a communication problem? Is it a personality conflict? Is there a problem chemistry between the child and the parent? Is there a developmental issue going on that means they're not getting along with that parent? If for some reason, do they want to get that parent in trouble? So these are all very legitimate questions that you have to sort out. And judges have often kind of been curious about alienation because historically, alienation was not accepted in the courts. It was rejected. And then it was considered, but there were still some questions about it. Well, more and more and more courts and lawyers and therapists and so on are willing to use the term alienation, okay? Now we have a swing where many attorneys, many parents, many therapists say, if in doubt, let's call it alienation. So I've had judges say, how do I sort this out? Because in the beginning, nothing was alienation. And now it seems that alienation is coming up all the time. That's a legitimate question. So there may be minor examples of inappropriate statements. A parent says something that they shouldn't have said. Does that make an alienation case? No, not really. And sometimes those parents, will apologize. I assume we're not talking about those cases because they're in the non-existent to mild categories. And by the way, the lower the severity, the easier the treatment. The lower the severity and the earlier you catch it, the more it can be, if you will, turned around, and you can see the child rebonding and rebuilding their relationship. And this gets into also not just children misrepresenting or lying, it gets into them telling you what you should do as a professional. Alienated children usually have a clear agenda. I'm telling you this. I know you're going to have to talk to the judge or a guardian, and this is what I want you to tell them. And I don't know if in our last podcast I told the story of the boy who was going to be 16, who told me that he never wanted to see his mother again. He was done. She never did anything for him in his life. Distortion, memory problem. She was the parent of the year and now has become, in his thinking, and to use his term, a dirtball. And he said, I'm old enough also to have my own lawyer, but I assume you will tell the judge what I say. So I ended up in court. Judge asked me if I have an opinion. I said, yes, Your Honor. He said, what's your opinion about the contact between the child and the mother? I said, immediate re-immersion with makeup time for the year that she has lost due to the litigation. He said, on what basis? We have other testimony that there is anxiety. Now, by the way, maybe we'll have time today to talk about the theories that are used against reunification. And one of them, of about 20 that I just wrote about in the reunification book, is the child's anxious, the child's anxious, the child's anxious. And what that means is until the anxiety lowers, the child shouldn't see the parent. Well, suppose the anxiety never lowers, which could be the case if they're an alienated child. And the judge said, what's the basis of your opinion? I said, Your Honor, I've researched the history of a loving, caring bond between mother and child. And until the divorce started, there was no breach. I can't find a social, psychological, historical, personal, physical reason for this child not to be with his mother. On that basis, I'm recommending that he's safe, and it is likely a rebuilding process. Judge said, how long do you think it'll take? I said, probably not long, because if you use your authority, that's going to have a big impact. The judge gave an order. 5 years later, I'm coming out of my office, and a young man is standing on the second floor near the banister, turns to me and says, "Hi, doctor. I don't know if you remember me." I said, "Sure, Paul. Nice to see you." He said, "I won't take much of your time. I just stopped by to thank you." I said, "Thank me for what?" He said, "You remember when I saw you? I was going to be 16 and I told you to tell the judge that I'll never see my mother again. And I heard in court, you said the opposite. So I came by the way, I saw her. We kind of reconnected. She was my best friend through high school and college. And had you not said that, had you listened to me, I would have lost my mother." He said, "So I came to tell you two things. One, thank you. And two, never listen to teenagers." So it's a story that's real, but it also reflects a question, a serious question, and not an easy question. When do professionals listen to the children? And that involves thorough research. And if you are convinced as a professional there was or could be a sound, loving, caring, supportive, safe relationship, you have an obligation to say that. Professionals don't adjudicate. They recommend and they do research to share with the courts or to share with a guardian or to share with a mediator, whoever else it is that they are responsive to, or to share it with the parents. Some parents are not fully aware of the degree of damage that's being done, not just to the relationship, but to the future of that child. Children who are alienated will develop trust problems in their relationships. Children who are alienated will have social relational issues in the future. Children who are alienated may develop psychological issues in the future. So they're not walking away unscathed.
Thank you so much. Um, I'm sorry. It's got very emotional for me because I was that child. And um, for people that don't know, we have an organization called the Hero Circle, which is an organization consists entirely of these adult children victims. And we today still live with the consequences of what alienation have done to us, and that's why we are lobbying so hard for the law to change and to get this recognized as child abuse. But I just wanted to say, in the chat room I saw Lise agree with you, as in she did reunification and her child thanked the guardian for not listening to the things that he said. And Autumn said that, God, I'll give the last breath to have someone as compassionate as you, Dr. Clawar, for her case. God bless you, sir. So anyway, thank you, parents, for all the questions. Please feel free to post as many questions as you can, because we're going to try to pick up as many as we can. And Mary and Crystal, I see a few of you that are sharing this video. Thank you so much. Yeah, so it's so unfortunate, because we've seen a lot of cases that parents that we talk to, I mean, it's so difficult to prove parental alienation as it is. And then there are cases where they finally could prove that there's parental alienation. And then yet still the professional, from the therapist, the guardian ad litem to lawyers and judges, still, like you said, are concerned about reunification. So instead of fixing the problem, like we've seen cases where it's so serious that they even said, well, the child is too far gone to give back to the alienated parents. And that's just completely wrong, because when you look at situations like, let's say, sexual abuse, you don't go, well, this child is too damaged, let's just leave the child with the abuser. But yet when it comes to alienation, it's shocking that they just go, well, this is too bad, it's too late. And sometimes the child even threatened to self-harm. So the judges are scared to give the child back to the alienated parents. And it's really, really sad situation.
Yes, it is. And you hit upon the area of severe cases. It's a severe case when a child says, I'm going to kill myself if you send me to my mother's, to my father's. Or they threaten physical harm. Some cases recently where physical harm was threatened against a step-parent. If I'm forced to go there, I will kill her. Well, that ended up in a 302, that ended up into a coercive therapeutic setting because it was found out the child had made other threats too. And we have to take those seriously for two reasons. One, it suggests the great duress the child is under. And two, there's a possibility that it could be a threat that is acted upon. So, but those are usually in the really far end of the curve, severe alienation cases. And what are some of the other characteristics of severe? Well, they start out with usually refusal to get in the car, refusal to come to dinner, social isolation. They want to stay in their room, which is not uncommon today with the use of the internet. It's hard to tell if they're alienated and don't want to come to dinner, or they're actually just on their games 8 hours a day. So physical isolation, not wanting to come for visitation, increasingly resisting visitation, which is a term I'm not thrilled with, but it's a term that's still used because visiting implies something less serious than a parental relationship. But the term visitation is still used. Children asserting that they'll come, but they only want to come once a month. They want to reduce the contact. And by the way, there may be no reason that a forensic expert could research as to why they're saying this. So usually you kind of eliminate, in the reunification book, we go through a listing of reasons why children may not want to be with a parent other than alienation. Go through that list, and if the answer is no, it's not that, no, it's not this, no, it's not that, then you're left with the possibility of alienation. Children making false or distorted accusations goes into the severe, category. And these become much more perplexing for parents, some of whom just give up and say, I can't really deal with a 5th investigation for CYS or a 10th. Physically acting out against a parent in the category of severe. Generally, I said earlier that these are escalating phenomena. By the time they get to this stage, I'm going to call the police on you, calling and threatening to call the police. Cases where the police appear serial times in the same home. They file an incident report, which is then often used as a basis against the alienated parent. By the way, there may be nothing in the police report that's negative about that parent, but the report itself is used as proof or evidence of a problem. Hostile or negative verbal interactions are another example of increasing symptoms of alienation. I hate you, I don't want to be here. Why would you want to be with me if I don't want to be with you? I don't have to listen to you. You're not like a real father anyhow. You're not like a real mother anyhow. I'm not going to listen to you. And then they do whatever they do, sit down and try to reinforce. And this can occur at relatively early ages. I've seen 6-year-olds, 7-year-olds do this. Generally, those kinds of resistances get increased preteen and in the teen years. Parents will say, well, I can't put them in the car. I can't force them to get in the car. What am I going to do? Kids 5'10", 180 pounds, and I'm saying, get in the car. And they say no. Make me get in the car, which then induces a physical contact, which would be a mistake. Then the police are called, and then there's a physical incident report, and around the cycle goes. So if it reaches this severe level, you need a highly skilled professional to deal with this. I don't know if you want to talk about their characteristics of that professional, or what I call the watch out theories. There are a number of theories that are put out there as to why a child shouldn't be with a target parent. Those theories are put out by professionals, and those theories are put out by the child or the alienating parent. Do you want me to address some of those theories?
Yes, please. Yes, and I mean, I see Carrie in the chat room definitely also addresses question about therapy. How do we find the right therapist that will understand this? Things like that. Yeah, please.
Okay, well, let's talk about that. First of all, a therapist needs to be goal-oriented. It's not, I did a piece some years ago called Therapy Schmerapy. So this is not therapy for therapy's sake. This is not traditional psychological therapy. This is not just feel-good therapy. This is not talking every week, how's it going, and are things better? That probably will make it worse. And in the reunification book, I talk about goal-oriented therapy. What does that mean? It means that if you have a specific problem and you identify the problem, the child won't talk to me. You identify the problem, the child won't go places with me. What is it? What are the details of the behavioral or social or verbal conflict? So once they're identified, that becomes the goal. For example, many children don't want to sit in the same room with the parent. Is that one of the goals? Many children say, I don't even want to talk about this. So I've had cases where just getting the child to talk about what's going on was actually one of the measures. And that gets into metrics. A good therapy has metrics. You can set a goal, set up procedures, and measure. So yes, eventually this child sat in the same room, because he wouldn't sit in the same room. He wouldn't look at his father. Then, after X amount of weeks, he looked at his father. So progressively, we began to meet goals, talk about, entertain questions, sit near, talk to, talk with, look at, tell stories about the past. Remember this story when grandmom came to visit you? No. Dad, tell the story. Then we say, progressively, we're starting an interchange to rebuild the social bonds. Good therapy has goals, it has measurements, it has objective things you can point to, which, by the way, is important. If it's under the control of the court would like to know what those measurements are. When does it end? How do you know you're being successful? Okay. In this case, of course, it continued to build. And at one point, I suggested that they might want to have dinner after the so-called therapy session. It's really social bonding. It's really rebuilding the social roles that they had. I am your father. You are my son. I am your son. You are my father. This is a role-building thing. This is not just, although feelings are important, just talking about feelings is not going to solve these problems. So where do you start? What's a middle point? Where do you end? What are the professional skills? Well, first of all, they have to understand forensic knowledge. What's that mean? They have to know about the legal aspects of these scenarios because they're usually legal things connected to it. The second characteristic of a good professional is they have a history of rebuilding social relationships. Okay? They're not just solving individual, or this is not an individual problem. This is a relational problem. So what are their specialties? Their specialties can be social worker, psychologist, psychiatrist, pastoral counselor, family therapist, clinical sociologist. I find that the individual specialty or their title that they have graduated graduate school with is not really the key to whether they're going to be successful or be helpful. And by the way, success may have to be cranked down. If the goal of a parent is to say, I demand overnights, they will sleep with me overnight, I demand 50-50. Well, that may be your goal, but after 6 months, maybe we have you going places together and doing things you couldn't do before. So is the parent willing to make some adjustment? By the way, it's not an easy adjustment, and it's not easy to swallow that you have less than you feel are your God-given rights to have. These professionals also have to have some knowledge of memory and memory distortion. They have to have role skills. They have to be able to teach new verbal skills. Excuse me, the way you just spoke to your father was not appropriate in terms of a father-son relationship. Can we kind of re-script this? Can I show you what would be an appropriate way to respond? They have to have knowledge of divorce or separation. They have to have the personal skill of incredible frustration tolerance, because these cases will try the patience of God. And so it might take a month. It might take 6 months. I had a case not too long ago of a boy who kept coming in, and he did the same speech every time. I don't want to see my father. I have a parent who's one parent is enough. It's called the one parent is enough theory. That's one of the reasons for not seeing them. I have one good parent, don't need him, okay? And anyhow, his girlfriend broke up the marriage. By the way, factually untrue. Don't need them, don't like them, don't want to see them. So this mantra continued, and I knew we had to buy some time. Unfortunately, that case took about a year before we began to have meaningful dialogue, meaningful eye contact, meaningful interaction, some contact out of the office, and so on. Now they're back to traveling together. They're back to doing sports together. They're back to texting each other. Texting is now very symbolic for kids. Well, they don't necessarily want to receive your text if you're one of the alienated parents. So these are the most important summary I could say for a professional is to know their mission. And that's what you should ask them and say, this is my history. This is my problem. What's your mission? And how will you execute it? What are your measures of success? And talk me through the interventions you will do to help it step by step. If they can answer those questions, you're in the right office. If they're not, I would thank them graciously and find somebody who meets those criteria.
Yeah, unfortunately, there's not a lot of therapists out there. Actually, Carrie mentioned this, that get it, that are capable of fixing this problem. So not just, I mean, like what you just said was so useful, all these criteria that are needed, but unfortunately, not a lot of options out there for parents. And I saw, I think Lise or someone was asking, and Jill asking about how to reach out to Dr. Clawar. We're going to be posting in our mailing list, the next newsletter, we're going to send out his his clinic contact information so that you can reach out to him. He does support parents from all around the world. So you know, it doesn't matter where you're located, there's a way for them to provide support for you. So we'll send that out in the next newsletter together with the link to this video, because I know that I mixed up some of the timing. So this interview is actually a lot earlier than we planned. So like a few hours out in difference. So I'm gonna make sure that I send the link out so that for parents that miss this live interview, they can still watch the recording. So thank you so much, Dr. Clawar. So I think, what about let's talk about different severity and what you do differently for those. You know, when you started to see, okay, now you're in the mild situation, right? Like you mentioned, this is a process. It started mild, and then it gets more serious and serious until it gets so severe, then the children no longer talking to you. And you started to notice these activity and behaviors. And you mentioned about, you know, let's do more type of connection activities. You know, what do you do when your children kind of like, well, you know, I just want to be in front of the computer, I just want to stay in the room, I don't feel like eating, but you know, you still have contact with your children.
Yes.
And the children still somewhat kind of polite to you. They haven't blatantly kind of in your face yet, but they resisting, you could see it. Like, what do you do?
It's a bit of a dilemma, but it doesn't have to be. Unfortunately, when a parent is in the alienation process, they often become afraid. They're afraid to do what they know they should do. For example, part of being a parent is to assert your values, which is, if you weren't under this pressure, would you want or let the child sit in the room for 8 hours on the internet? The answer is no. This is one of the new major battles in parenting, even outside of alienation. But assert your values. What are your values? I know you would rather sit and do that, but today we're going to visit grandma. Is that optional? No, not really. Your value is that grandma is important. She's 80 years old. She's been sick. And you know what? I'd like you to get ready by 12 o'clock. So when we're under attack, either by another parent and or feeling the child is kind of distancing themselves, we become afraid and we do what I call the opposite of what we should do. So you pretty much know what you should do because it works by the principle of opposites. If you feel like not setting boundaries, set a boundary and say, well, you know, you're 15, so I think you're home by 10. And parents have said to me over the years, I tend not to do this. I don't assert my values. I don't assert the boundaries. I don't challenge their distortions because I think I'm already in trouble and I will make it worse. The answer is you will not. You will actually be doing what you should do, you know, as the parent. Intensifying joint activities is hard under non-alienating conditions. but do you insist on doing it? And you'll find that when you do, you often hear the kids say, no, I didn't want to do the wave runner. You kind of made me do it. There's an old song, you made me do it. I didn't want to do it. And then they say, you know what, Dad, I had a good time. I love you. You know what, Mom, I really didn't want to go shopping for that, but I love the outfits you got me for school. Thank you. So my message is, don't be afraid. You feel your parenting authority and legitimacy is slipping. And some parents get so afraid, they're even afraid to assert their love. I've had parents say, I don't want to say I love you too much. Well, how many times would you say it if you weren't afraid? And mother recently said to me, oh my God, she said, probably too much. But every time I look at him, I want to say, I love you so much. I love you so much. I said, do it. She said, do it? I said, yeah, I'm saying that officially. And if you want to blame somebody, blame me. Assert your love. Let them also see that other people respect you, especially in the mild forms. That has a big effect. If they need to go to work with you and they can see fellow workers or fellow professionals being with you, you're not protecting them in the mild cases or even the severe by being silent. The biggest mistake, but it's normal, and I probably would do the same under the conditions, is to back up, hunker down, be in the corner, and let the kid do what they want. I advise you not to do that. I advise you to nip it in the bud. If something's out of whack, call it out of whack. If they're behaving in a way in your home that doesn't make sense, then assert your values. Excuse me, they just had 10 kids over and they were vaping, and you let that happen? Why? Would you do that? No, I wouldn't have done that under conditions. I was just afraid that they would really come back at me harder. Is this responsive to what you're asking?
Yeah, that's very helpful. And actually, Tyler brought up a good question about, like, does it apply to children of any age? Is there a particular age or situation where you would do things a little bit differently? And also, at what point do you because, like you said, parents are afraid, and we do have situation where, for example, where you see the child behave a certain way, and then the parent try to assert their authority by taking the phone away, and then that end up being the trigger of the child never come back again. So parents are so afraid of that kind of situation, and it does happen. So is there different boundaries when it comes to level of severity that we somehow stop asserting our boundaries, our authorities?
The theoretical answer is no. The practical answer is harder. Okay, because in some cases, especially severe, some of these scenarios are set up. They're prearranged to involve the police, to draw other people in, to call the other parent to come and pick them up. So don't get me wrong, these scenarios could be quite orchestrated and quite difficult to deal with. The important thing, I think at all levels, my general answer is no, the level doesn't matter. Don't give up your parenting, but involve others so they know what's going on. I had a father recently who was getting set up after set up. Finally, he went to the local police and they said, look, this is my custody order. I need to tell you what's going on. You may get some phone calls. Sometimes therapists, guardians, others who are involved, if they are kind of giving information ahead, it can really help. Say, this is what I'm doing, this is what I'm going to say, I don't know what the results are. I have found that can be extremely helpful. By the way, in that case, the police were called and they came and they did a quick questioning. They could find nothing inappropriate and put in the police report that there was nothing inappropriate. In fact, the child's story was inconsistent. So bringing others in who may already be involved, right? But I think the other thing I would say is to be aware of the scenarios that either the alienating parent will use or the child will use, and be ready for them, okay? Should I mention some of those?
Yes, please.
Okay. So one of them is what we already said, is the anxiety theory. Child can't see you because they're anxious. Well, if we didn't see our children when they were anxious, we probably would never see them. because children are constantly in a state of different anxiety in their life. Okay, but this anxiety is about you. Okay, is that a reason not to be with a parent? Let's assume they're still married. Children go back and forth in custody in a marriage. 6 months, they only want to see their mother. 2 months later, they only want to be with their father. 2 months later, they want to be with their mother and their father. So children do custodial shifts all the time. It's just not called that because they're married or they're together. So unless there is a really serious social pathological reason, anxiety is not a reason not to be with a parent. In fact, it may be a reason to be with them, because by being with them, you may find that the anxiety remits at times, not always. Scared theory is used a lot. Child's scared, they don't want to come. Well, a good clinician will say, scared of what? Let's talk specifically what they're scared of. Some children will say, I don't know. I don't know what I'm scared of. So if they can't say specifically what it is, then you maybe do a little bit more research. Maybe it's a chemistry issue. Maybe it's a communication issue, but it's not an issue that can't be dealt with. Why else might they not want to come? Therapists will say the child needs separate therapy. Wait a minute. Other parents saying, let's do it together. I'll come in. I'll work with the child. Clinician or other parent says no. For a while, the child needs separate therapy. Separate therapy will only work to a degree with relational problems. Eventually, we have to put the people together. All right? Another assertion is, I don't need that person in my life. My life is good without them. I don't really need them. I don't really want them. Okay? Most judges I've been in front of don't buy that theory, that if there's a loving, caring, good history, future potential parent, you don't exclude the parent because somebody says they're fine without them. Okay? There's another theory called they can't change theory. And by the way, some parents don't change. Okay? Does that mean it's bad? Okay, I've had parents who are rigid. That's right. When they say get up in the morning, you get up. One kid said to me, I'm not in the military. I said, what's that mean? He says, I don't want to come here. My father's like a military. He wants me up at 9. He wants me working. He wants me to save my money. He wants me to do this. He wants me to be on time for our meals. So far, I haven't heard a problem. The child, of course, does. And my dad can't change. And I said, well, it's a couple of possibilities. How about you changing? He said, say what? I said, well, what if you change? He said, what does that mean? I said, well, you would get up on time. You would go to work. You would come to dinner. He said, I thought you were a therapist. I said, what's that mean? He said, I thought you were supposed to listen to children and kind of do what they say. I said, well, I listen, but sometimes I have suggestions that are a little different. He laughed, and we got along pretty well. Other reasons for not seeing a parent, it's failed before. And by the way, it's often true. Kids in alienation cases have often been to 2, 3, 4, 5, or 10 therapists. And it's failed before. Well, it's failed for a couple of reasons. One is there may not have been clear metrics, but 2 is the alienation hasn't stopped. So, of course, it's not going to work, which is why I often recommend when it's founded that there be some makeup time to be able to repair the relationship. Another thing you'll hear is we never really got along. By the way, it might be true. Doesn't mean you don't see a parent. Then there's what I call the maybe later theory. Clinicians use this. I mentioned in the last podcast stories about clinicians that will say, it's called readiness theory. The child's not ready yet. And some kids have been in therapy for a year or 2 or 3, and they're still not ready. The question is, when are they ready? In that case, the clinician said, maybe by the time he's ready for college. He was 15. So we were supposed to wait 3 more years for the child to get ready. Some kids under alienation never get ready. So you're ready when you're ready, when to see and meet and work on the relationship. Kids will say, I have rights. I want my own lawyer. Sometimes they get their own lawyer, by the way. One good parent is enough is another assertion you hear. Then we have phase-in theory. We should do it gradually, carefully, slowly, in metered fashion. And sometimes that may be true. If there is no problem of abuse, of negative parenting, if there's a history of positive interaction, love, concern, and caring, phase-in theory might just be an excuse. Because the parent's not going to do anything bad because their history is they didn't do anything bad. So my question is, why phase them in? And in cases, some, where I've recommended radical immersion, there's two theories here, phase-in theory or radical immersion. Often when the conditions have been historically good, depending on the degree of damage that's been done, radical immersion theory can work fine. Final point, quote, the chemistry just isn't there. Kids now know about chemistry, so they'll talk about chemistry. I don't really have as good chemistry with my mom as my dad. So that's the reason not to have a dad? Say what? Well, what are you saying? So a lot of times chemistry is different for all people. What's wrong with the chemistry? And by the way, maybe we can get a few chemicals here to change the chemistry. Say to them, that's my job. My job is to fix the chemistry. So why don't we do that? That often brings about a surprise reaction. A child recently said to me, in good faith, by the way, many of these kids want, need, and desire a relationship with the alienated parent. They've just been distorted over time. So what you see ain't necessarily what you get. An angry, hateful child may not be underneath an angry, hateful child. A hostile child may be a child whose love bond has been damaged. It doesn't mean that's who they are. Now, sometimes it exists for such a long period of time that parents will say, I think it's true, my kid really hates me. I think it's true, they really want me dead. Now, that's really far along on the curve. And even in some cases that look extreme, when I've probed in certain ways, I find out that what you see ain't necessarily what you get underneath. I've had kids even say to me, okay, maybe you could fix it, but it'll never work. And I say, huh? What's that mean? They say, you don't understand how much my father hates her guts. You don't understand how much my mother hates him. And so they're living in worlds of hate. They're good learners. They absorb the hate. They represent the hate. Is it really them? Well, you've got to do lots and lots and lots of damage at different layers for that to be authentic. And I find, sadly, but positively, in many cases, that's why they end up disturbed. That's why they end up with social, psychological problems, because they would like to reach out, or sometimes they'll reach out in symbolic ways. I've had kids who can't go over at the soccer game and hug that parent who's sitting in the stands. They know they can't do it. And I had a kid recently who kicked the ball out of bounds, which was right near his father's feet. And of course, he was over there. And they nodded to each other. He got back on the field and he played. And I said, is that it? Did you do that? He said, that's all I could do. I couldn't go over after the game and hug him. All hell would have broken loose. And anyhow, my mother had 9 of her crew there. Friends and relatives were there to support this physical isolation. What would be normal for a child to do? Hug his mom? Good game. Go over, hug his dad. He knew that the rules were different. So kids will sometimes find subversive ways, including, by the way, I've had cases where kids have intentionally extended the therapy and occasionally have slipped and said to me, this is the only time I can really see my mom. This is the only time I can really get to see my dad. And because of what you said, I get an extra hour and we go to dinner. And that's it. I said, are you going to tell anybody? No, he said, I'm not telling anybody else this. Those are the rules. I'm trying to figure out ways around them. So what we see ain't necessarily what you get underneath. That's the pathos in these cases. And that's the damage. Because their natural gravitation is toward their parent. And when they're interfered with that, we're going to have social, psychological dilemmas.
Thank you so much. And I think that is so important for parents to recognize that your children don't hate you. It gives so much hope because parents really need to hear that. Parents need to know that so that you don't give up on the fight. You don't just give up hope, and also you don't resent your children, because a lot of the time parents will then turn around and don't recognize that the children are the victims, and then they end up resenting their children and thinking, well, why are my children saying this thing? Why are, they should know better, right? And then so the parents reacting to this, and then they don't help the situation. So it's so important to recognize.
It is, and the parents can learn new scripts. These are very hard conditions. But if you learn, and some do it naturally. Some parents will say, I hear what you're saying. It's inappropriate. You're using profanity. I'm still your father. I'm still your mother. I still love you. This behavior is unacceptable. That's not a common, you have to learn. Some do it naturally, but you kind of have to learn to be able to do that because you're scared. If it's the old song "Slip Sliding Away," I'm sorry for quoting these old songs. I think in song titles. I'm working on a book now that has song titles in it. Slip Sliding Away, and they're like, "Well, I can't do this because I'm dangling by a thread, and if I say anything harsh, this thread will get snipped." I hear you, doctor, they say, but I'm really, really scared to do that. And I say, well, I understand you're scared. I would be too. But tap dancing around your parenting, tap dancing around your values is, that's not how you really feel. Oh, no, I want to say, I said bedtime, bedtime is 9:30. Say, well, at mom's, I'm allowed to stay up until 11. And so I realized that the child keeps using the other environment, which they'll do anyhow without alienation, keep using the environment, against any of my rules. And I'm told I have too many rules, and rules are bad. So, well, that's a good basis for a discussion. Where are there rules? Are there rules in school? Are there rules on the bus? Where aren't there rules? And what's the purpose of the rules? You're afraid to have? Yeah, I'm afraid to have that discussion because I think it's just going to generate more hostility. And then I say, don't be afraid of the hostility. Okay, don't show that you're anxious, even though you are anxious, because that will just make the anxiety, geometric. Don't be afraid to defer a discussion. You don't have to have, and don't have a serious discussion every time the kids come. And that happens a lot. You got to really talk about this. We really have to understand, where are you hearing this? Where are you hearing that I didn't pay support? We're going to get to the bottom of this. I'm like, well, I don't know. I don't think I'd want to go there for a weekend. So pick your timing, pick your battles. Don't make every discussion serious. I've had kids say to me, every time we're in the car, every time we're having dinner, because especially for a parent who's losing time, they tend to want to talk about the relationship. And I'll say this, instead of having the relationship, go down the shore, ride bikes together, play cards, play a game, teach them chess, do things together that work against alienation, which is the intentional or unintentional damaging of your bonds. And you're doing everything you can that's social and relational. And the child leaves feeling, I had a good time. I've had kids say to me, I wouldn't say it. I said, did you have a good time? They say, you going to tell anybody? I'm like, why? Because I did have a good time, but I can't tell mom or dad, and I can't tell the other one for different reasons. I'll tell you the truth. It was kind of fun bouncing up and down on that thing, that blows the air under you, and you're like floating in space. I thought that was kind of cool. So what you see ain't necessarily what you get. Hang in there, find help, find the right professional, Stick to your values. Parent as though alienation is not going on, because that's where it'll slide away some more. Don't accept abuse. Don't accept false abuse charges. Don't accept profanity when it's inappropriate. And assert the fact that I'm still your mother. I'm still your father. I hear you saying things that make it sound like I'm not. I didn't give up my role. Do you hear me, honey? I ain't going anywhere. I love you. I'm sorry we're not communicating well. Doesn't change my love. And by the way, it shouldn't change yours. Did you hear what I said? Yeah. What did I say? That it won't change yours. It won't change my what? It won't change your... You can say the word. You afraid to say? Love? I love you. And by the way, I know you love me. So anyhow, we're going to get a snack today. So let's go do it, and then I'll take you to the water ice place. Love you. You hear me, honey? I love you. So in the face of hostility, hatred, contempt, do not be afraid to share your love. It sounds weird, but it is a powerful tool. And sometimes I'm the one who has to tell them that. And I'll say, well, why do you think your mother comes here for a year and a half? Why do you think your father's paying for this? I know why. Cause trouble. To win. That's what, oh yeah, so your dad's here to win. To win what? To win some kind of screwed up battle. That's why he's here. Really? Any other reasons? Nope. That's it. Kid says, so how long am I going to have to come? I said, I'm sorry to tell you, a long, long, long time. He said, why? I said, because of what you just said. I happen to know why your dad's here. He loves the hell out of you. He cries when you leave, but he doesn't want to show you that. He misses you. He's trying to have a better life with you. He's trying to be your teacher and your guide. And you say, all he wants to do is win. So you need me a bit longer, because you're going to get that message straightened out. There's some message in your head. I don't know where you got it from. To tell you the truth, I don't really care. But it's not correct. And when we see reality that's not correct, we got to get it straightened out.
I'm seeing the audience it's really hit home for a lot of parents, because like people are saying they're crying ugly tears right now, like Autumn and Katie, and it's totally like it's so true. It's so helpful. I want to be respectful of your time. I know I only asked for an hour. Like, how are you with timing? I have millions more questions, so obviously it's
I could go another 10 minutes.
okay. Thank you. So then, can we talk about the adult children? Because like at some point the children's going to age out, because a lot of these custody battles end up going on and on for years. And also for parents, a lot of the time they don't realize what they were looking at, and they also themselves don't realize what they were doing, because as alienated parents, if you don't pick up new skill quickly, and like you said, either they back up, or they react, or whatever, or they give up on their children, or they resenting the children, and then they cross alienating and all that kind of thing. So at some point it could be that the children grow out of the system, so they're no longer 18, and you can't put them through therapy if they refuse to.
No, you
Then
can't.
yeah, what should they do at that point?
Well, a couple things. Go back in history a little bit, which is why it's important to get this earlier and to work on it carefully and seriously to prevent the aging out. Because I've had kids who've said, and parents have to be careful here. I've had kids said, if my mother shows up on the college campus again, I'll have her arrested. So they've hit a point of legal authority. Because I said it's an escalating phenomena, I was taught as a kid a message that isn't true. I was taught that time heals all wounds. And with alienation, I find that time can make things worse. I wrote about a concept called the point of no return. It's very hard to tell when children reach this, and I always assume they haven't, which means there's so much damage, you can't go back, and you can't heal, and you can't repair. So I err on that side because if there's an opportunity to heal, rather have that. Some children, as young adults, have hit a point of no return. There are things you could try. Some work, some don't. I've had grandmothers, grandfathers, aunts, uncles, close friends try to do what I call bridge building, and either call the child, write the child, see the child, and try to build a social bridge, because sometimes children will talk to these people. They won't talk to the parent, or they won't see the parent, or they'll give them minimal contact. In many, many cases, children become angry because the parent can't or won't pay, for example, for college. And they haven't seen them for 5 years. It's like, well, let's see this equation here. You have no relationship with them, but they're still supposed to pay for college. And if they don't pay for college, you don't like them. So these things become kind of conundrums. Unfortunately, contact is sometimes made when a parent becomes ill, or I've had cases where they're fatally ill. But even then, sometimes they won't come. I've had children who wouldn't come to a funeral. So clearly they've crossed over. That's another term I use. They've crossed over into total relational damage. Parents have to be careful here, because I've had parents who kept up emails and texts and letters and so on. And I've had children say, I'm notifying my employer, I'm notifying my college that this person is now causing harassment. So from a legal point of view and a personal point of view, I have a piece of advice for your listeners. When alienation starts, and when it continues, and when it accelerates, and God forbid, when it hits a point of no return, I'm going to give you a piece of advice that I would find hard to follow. And that is, live your life. You will be of no use to the child if you're physically damaged. Stress from these cases causes cortisol in your bloodstream, which can cause brain and coronary issues. You must eat right. You must, in fact, if you're going to stay in the battle, you've got to be healthier. I've had parents who put on weight, radically lost weight, not exercising anymore, not socializing, not dating. Why? Because their mission has become the rejuvenation of the relationship, and nothing else matters. And I've said to many parents over the years, the first thing I want to work with you on is your health plan. And most of them have no health plan. Say, are you walking? No. Are you eating Mediterranean diet? No. Are you eliminating this stress can do you in. So for what it's worth, and I know it's hard to do, get a health plan. That includes good social relationships. It includes meditation. It includes exercise. It includes your diet. It includes good sleep, which is the secret sauce of everything. If you're getting less than 7 hours or 8 hours as an adult, which most of us are, you're in trouble. So try 6, and don't cogitate on it before you go to bed every single night, planning your strategy for the next day. So you got to try, and this is hard to do, you got to try to have a full life. You'll be better with the child. You'll be better with your attorney. You'll be better if you go to court, because you will be healthier. By the way, in terms of reflection, the child will see that. You're not burned out. You're not out of the box. You're not looking weak. You're not sad. In fact, I've had some kids say, Dad, recently one said, what the hell are you so happy about? Father said, I'm alive. Got the perfect script. You're sitting in front of me. I see you growing up. I love the hell out of you. And I could afford these damn sessions. The kid laughed and said, that's a funny answer, Pop. He said, well, that's how I feel. And by the way, you're not exercising enough, he said. So get your ass moving. And he was trying to practice something that was very hard to do, which is having a balanced life when these forms of craziness force you to have an unbalanced life. Sorry for the recommendation, but it can help.
It's so true though, because um, I have talked to other adult children victim, and the same with me. Is by the time that we recognize what happened to us, and not, by the way, not all adult children wake up to the reality of it. But anyway, for us that woke up to it later, the amount of guilt is just undescribable.
Yeah,
And the only thing that helped us as these children is to look back and see that our parents are okay, that they didn't suffer too badly. So you need to take care of yourself, for you, but also for your children. And
yeah,
that's such a great advice. Yeah.
it is very much. And I'm working now on a project. It's not ready for publication. Is the guilt of the adult children? It's a large hidden population, and I don't know how large. With your help, I may be able to find out through your viewers. And we're not talking about them. We're not understanding how they have suffered with later recognition, like you said, but they're there. And these are the people who've kind of the fallen soldiers of the battle. The problem is the severe alienators don't see or sometimes don't care because they have a mission. Therapist needs a mission. The alienated parent needs a mission, but the alienator has a mission. The problem is many of them are so persistent and have so much stamina that they're successful to various degrees in their mission, which is really an unhealthy mission.
Thank you. Yeah, in the chat room, I see T. People can see her name like T Kiddo. Actually, she's Tracy, but she just said, yes, I feel so guilty for being my big girl decision, because she was the adult child. I mean, she was a child victim, and she refused the relationship, and she was proudly, told that, oh, good girl, you're the big girl, you made the choice to not have the relationship with your dad, and now she's an adult, she carried that guilt. And I can tell you, a lot of us, as the adult children, we definitely suffer through that. Not to mention, all other consequences, like you said, about trust issue, about codependency issue, and just so much more. Self-esteem issues and depression and anxiety and all that.
The
But
first, I'm
yeah,
sorry, go ahead.
go
The
ahead.
first,
Yeah.
as in all forms of abuse, the first part of treatment is to recognize that you didn't do it. And grasping that simple phrase alone may take some time. You didn't do it. It wasn't your responsibility. This was orchestrated, sometimes intentionally or unintentionally, doesn't matter. Results are the same. But I find once people kind of deal with that phrase, that you didn't do it, how did this transpire? And some people do have an opportunity to go back. I have children who are getting married, and they want to invite, the desire would be to invite the parent that they had no relationship with. And even at that point, the alienating parent says, if they come, I'm not coming. If they come, I'm not paying for the wedding. I've had these adult children say, so when does this stop? And they often answer their own question, as one young woman did recently who came to see me. And she said, oh, I don't need you to answer. The answer is never. And she was going to go ahead anyhow and invite the target parent. And I told her to say, which I might have mentioned before, this is my wedding and this is my day. And a lot has been ruined in my life, but not this day. I make this decision. So if you decide not to come, that's your decision. But my other parent will be invited. So that took a lot of guts. And by the way, she broke that. So even in later years, she broke the pattern. If more could do that, it would certainly be very good.
It's not easy though. Even when you as adult, it doesn't change the dynamic. Like the abuser still have that power over you.
Yeah.
It doesn't. It's nothing to do with age. You could be in
No.
your 50, 60.
Yeah.
That abusive parent still
Yeah.
have that power role over you. And
Yes. Yeah. Until I would just agree with you halfway. Until and if the power, as in this wedding, is removed. And there are ways to remove it, maybe not 100%, but to the degree where the alienated child is freed up from this form of captivation, that they were in. Because the basic thing that you can help them with in terms of empowerment is to live a life that's different than the directives, because abusers give us directives. It's kind of like a computer program. It's set up that you behave and think in a certain way. And as soon as we begin to violate the thinking and the behavior, it creates a form of disempowerment. But I agree with you, at any age, not easy, but should be attempted no matter what age. I've had sisters who were separated because they had different views of parents, and they didn't come together till they were 80 years of age. And at 80 years, they reconnected against the program that you shouldn't talk to your sister because she's a traitor. And at 80, they came together. Translation, they broke the program. That's why I called my book Brainwashing and Programming rather than just Alienation. They mean the same thing, but they're kind of broken down a little bit differently, because it is a program with procedures, ideas, and goals, and the brainwashing of the actual techniques that are used to get to the program. Well, thank you.
Sorry, go ahead.
So thank you for having me.
Yeah, no, I mean, no, I totally agree with you, but it takes awareness. Like if the children doesn't, these adult children, if they not become aware,
Yeah.
and then seek help,
Yeah.
or self-help or getting outside help, then yeah, it's very difficult to break that dynamic, because they just go on with that. I know we're out of time. I appreciate you so much, and I hope that we can have you back again, maybe in a couple of months, especially with you make more progress with that edition of your book, and we can definitely talk more about the adult children. Really appreciate you. I'm also really curious about your advice for like how do we can get more of this recognized in the DSM, because right now the way that it's recognized is not particularly explicit and not as helpful for parents and for professional yet, and things like that.
Yeah, that's a whole separate issue that many professionals have tried to work on that, including, I think, Richard Gardner himself, who helped to formulate some of the original ideas, although later on he went off into some different ways. But he wasn't successful, in doing that. I think that would have to come from professionals, but also their professional societies who use the DSM, because the DSM is used not just by psychologists and psychiatrists. It's used by a whole group of mental health professionals. I think one strategy would be to have meetings of those key professionals and have them petition for, this. There are things in there that can be used, but the actual term itself, alienation,
right,
is not there as a diagnosis. So that, I think that would take some professional pressure. But, if the Social Work Association and the Sociology Association and the Family Counseling Association agreed that this is something that would help them, because even now you can't get reimbursement from insurance. They generally they don't pay for forensic related issues. At least some of them don't.
right.
I don't have the magic answer for the question, but
yeah, thank you. No, I mean, it's a big issue, obviously, and then because of the lack of recognition at all levels, we end up with no resources, especially like for us as the adult children victims, because there's no recognition that it's abuse, that it's a crime, or that it's a problem. Then there's no need to provide solution. The system doesn't recognize that, and so we don't have anywhere to go. And I really appreciated you giving a little bit of the hint into how we can break that out. So hopefully I'll reach out to you again soon, and then hopefully we can get you back in a couple of months, maybe talk more about the adult children side of it later. But thank you so much,
Okay,
And
thank
parents, thank you so much for tuning in. I really appreciate everyone that have been sharing. I saw Sharon, Natalie, Raluca helping to share this, Crystal, Rebecca. So Claudia, thank you so much, everyone that have been sharing, and all the questions. Feel free to post more questions because, like I said, we're going to try to bring Dr. Clawar back again, and we will try to follow up with you guys as much as we can. Please help share this. Please like, and if you are not already on our mailing list, please go on our website at VictimToHero.com and join our mailing list. We're going to have another event coming up the week coming up soon that specifically deal with custody interference. But with that event, we're not going to be live streaming. We're not going to be saving or recording that event. That event is a live interaction. It's a Zoom call. So please join our mailing list so that we can have you participate in that Zoom call. And we haven't picked a time and date yet. I'll figure that out. I'm sorry, I'm still on the road, so I haven't got a chance to figure out all the specific of that. So please join us. And this event is still going to be saved on our Facebook page, and we're going to post this on YouTube as well. And I apologize for a time difference in when this was recorded. And thank you so much, everyone, for your support. Yesterday, my interview with there's an interview that I did with, I think, Thrive Loud. I posted that on our Facebook page, that where I share a little bit of my story and what we've been working on. So if you haven't seen that, check it out on our Facebook page. And thank you so much, everyone. We'll see you guys again soon. Thank you.